Our neighbors took our fence while we were on a road trip. So, we've had issues with our attached neighbors from the moment that we bought our house. Originally, it was just a 60-something female and her 18-something male grandson. The day we moved in, we tried to make small talk and introduced ourselves. The woman was dropping hints that the old owners used to bake her goodies all the time and she missed it, kind of insinuating that we should be like them because she deserved to be treated like a princess. The grandson introduced himself as the worst person in town. What an intro. So afterwards, we just tried to keep a friendly distance and stay out of their way. Suddenly, after about a week of living here, they began screaming at odd hours, blasting music and banging on the walls. The police were at their house for domestic disputes monthly due to the woman calling the cops on her grandson. We've lived here for over 2 years now, fixing up our house and making it beautiful and adding value to it. Up to this point, we've just let them have their problems because it's not like we have kids to worry about protecting, it's just my partner and I in our mid-20s. Fast forward to last month. One evening, after it got dark, we heard what we thought were gunshots right in our backyard. Mind you, we live in a downtown suburb borough with an older person facility right behind our house, so we were a little concerned. We have cameras that we installed just to be safe, so we checked them. The grandson and his friends were sitting in their yard talking about shooting another round. They'll just think it's fireworks, and that's a .45 round. Unfortunately, it was dark and we couldn't see them shoot it, but the camera picked up the sound of them shooting off 9 rounds, so naturally, we called the cops. The kids then left, and the cops couldn't prove anyone was on the premises with the gun, so they let it go. In the beginning of August, the woman decided to let her daughter, sister-in-law, and their children move in with them for who knows what reason. Before this, they had only come to visit on holidays, and one time they left their infant child on the street in a carrier for over half an hour until I knocked and let them know that she was out there. None of my business. But from there on, the screaming and the yelling got worse, and this time with crying kids in the mix. I had half a mind to call CPS, but I've heard the awful things that happen to kids in the system, so I couldn't bring myself to do it. This month, we were fortunate enough to go on a road trip to see some cool places and visit family. We left at the end of August, and we were checking our cameras when we had service, which was not much. One day, we get a call from our unattached neighbor saying that our attached neighbors were building a really ugly shed with spare planks from who knows where. We tried not to worry too much because up to this point, their crappy shed wasn't our problem other than an eyesore in the neighborhood. We just enjoyed the rest of our trip and let it go, occasionally checking to make sure they weren't in our yard or anything since it's nicely fenced in and gated. Didn't catch anything on camera other than them building their crappy shed. We arrived home a few hours ago to find out those entitled jerks dug out and stole part of our fence, the metal post and chain link, to create a back fence and gate for their yard. This left huge holes in our back parking area that my partner almost tripped and fell into. They also tied into our fence incorrectly, pulling our fence lopsided and loose, basically damaging it. Unfortunately, our camera didn't catch them taking our fence, just it was in our yard in one frame and in theirs the next. We want to press charges, but aren't sure how to go about it. We checked our seller's disclosure stating that the previous owners of our house had put the fence in, so we know it was our fence that they took. I'm so livid, and I know yelling at them won't fix it, but how can you be so entitled that you can't even buy your own chain link fence, but instead steal your neighbors when they aren't home? Call the police, file a report, and cut any fence tied into your fence post. We are planning to call the borough tomorrow and file a report with the police. We would do that last part, but considering the gunshot situation, the fact that we share a wall with them that doesn't have a firewall between us, and the fact that we know they are violent people who don't want to do anything that would cause them to be violent toward us. Thank you for the good advice, though. It's very appreciated. Sometimes it's hard to think logically when you're seeing red. And then call your homeowner's insurance company as well. Very good idea and not something I thought of. See, you gotta be careful in this situation. You don't want to tick off the crazy neighbors, but you gotta do something to handle it. You could probably lawyer up in this situation. What do you think? What would you do? Thank you for your input, Karen. Or how I did exactly what the HR lady told me to do. Posted by SureFineWhatever67. The context. I, 35-year-old female, live in a big city in Western Europe. After graduating college, I was hired as an office assistant in a big company. Let's call it Happy Place. I did my last internship as a student there, and it went so well that I got hired just a few weeks after getting my master's degree. Over the next 10 years, I worked my way up from an assistant to office manager to head of one of the biggest departments. I was not paid a lot of money, but it was above average and the benefits were great. But the main reason I stayed for so long was the people who worked there. Over the year, I've made quite a few friends there, and by the year 2020, I was one of the most experienced people working in Happy Place. My colleagues often came to me for advice about how to do this or that, and I also had a great relationship with the big bosses. And the cherry on top was that I had the best boss someone can hope for. Let's call her Maggie. Maggie was 10 years older than me, and she was Wonder Woman. She is nice, professional, cool, helpful, and has a heart of gold. I've worked with her during my whole time at Happy Place, and the last 4 years, she was my direct supervisor. I loved her. Then, in 2020, a few things happened almost at the same time, and over the course of 6 months, Happy Place turned into Sad Place. First, the company hired a new HR lady, Karen. She was the worst. She treated everyone below her level of responsibilities, which is pretty much 99% of the staff, as if they were lesser people, talked down to everyone, and constantly made changes in the HR policies. She implemented quite a few new rules, which led to us losing some of the benefits that we liked, like free lunches, paid time off to go to the doctor's office during office hours, and so on. But the CEO of the company trusted her for some reason, and soon he stopped taking meeting with the staff, making Karen the only person who could make decisions regarding the staff, which meant that no one could actually complain about her, and we slowly started feeling helpless. Second, Maggie was promoted to a different field, the one that she actually wanted to work in, so I can't be mad at her for leaving, and she got replaced by Susan as my new supervisor. Susan was cool, but she was my age and with less experience, which did not make much sense. So, even though on paper she was the one in charge, I was the one constantly explaining to her how things worked and what needed to be done, while she took the credit. And lastly, pandemic. Our line of work was highly impacted by the pandemic, so the whole year of 2020, I was working under an enormous amount of stress, taking almost no vacation time, doing my job and some of Susan's job, as at some point she went on medical leave, and some of my co-workers' jobs, as some colleagues cracked under the tension and quit, but no one got hired to replace them. But despite all of the hard work, I did not receive any pandemic-related bonus, which was weird since some of my coworkers let it slip that they got a €1,000 bonus for achievements during the pandemic. The compliance. So, given all the events of 2020, in January 2021, I've decided that enough was enough. When it was my time for my annual review, I've decided that I would negotiate better conditions for myself, because as much as I love my job and the people I've worked for, I couldn't keep working so much for so little pay. As Susan was still on medical leave, Karen was the one who did my annual review, despite the fact that I've only met her a few times and we've never directly worked together. In preparation for the meeting, I've made a list of the things that I've been putting up with, and a list of reasons why I should get a slight pay bump. I was asking for a 15% pay increase, but was happy to accept a 10%. It was not about the money. It was about knowing that there was at least a chance that management valued me as an employee, and that I was not just some sucker who did so much for not even a thank you. After making my case to Karen and carefully explaining to her what my job was and what I was actually doing, I asked her the dreaded question. She looked at me, smiled, and said, "OP, I appreciate everything you've been doing for the company, and we value you as an employee, but your responsibilities and your abilities are not worth that much." I was speechless. I admit I was so angry and hurt that I felt tears coming up to my eyes. But I took a deep breath, calmed myself, and said, "Thank you for your input, Karen, but I cannot keep working in these conditions. It's not worth it." Karen rolled her eyes and replied, "Then you can quit, but I will be sorry to see you go." And quit I did. You see, there were two things that Karen did not know. First, as explained, I was a highly valued employee with a great reputation and over 10 years of experience in the field. In our field, reputation is important, and for the last 2 years, I've been receiving job offers from competitors. I always refused because I loved working for Happy Place. But since the events of 2020, I started taking interviews, checking what else was out there. And just before my meeting with Karen, I did an interview with Cool Company, who offered me a 60% raise to do the same job as I did for Happy Place. Second, remember how I said I took almost no vacation days in 2020? So, by January of 2021, I had over 2 months of paid leave available. I checked with the HR, not Karen, the week before my annual review, and they confirmed to me, in writing, that I was free to take my vacation days whenever I wanted. So, I did exactly what Karen told me to do. I quit. I put in my 2 months notice and took my 2 months vacation, which meant that I came to work for only 1 day to clean out my office and say goodbye before leaving for good. I felt bad because I left so many of my colleagues in a really bad position since they now had to do my job. But they all assured me that they understood and that they would have done the same thing. After my 2 months paid vacation, I started working at Cool Company, and I've been here ever since. The aftermath. I kept in touch with a few friends from Happy Place, and they regularly informed me of what was going on over there. It seems that me quitting was the push that many of my coworkers needed to also make their final leap and quit. As I said, the conditions went from great to bad since Karen took office. Also, the fact that I quit so abruptly got the attention of the CEO, as we had a good relationship. He asked Maggie, who was aware of the whole story with Karen, about it, and she told him the truth. About me not getting the pandemic bonus, about Karen speaking down to staff members, about her telling me to quit if I wanted to. Then, the CEO finally opened his eyes and launched an investigation into Karen's actions. He personally did interviews with some staff members and heard stories about her from people from many different departments. He also investigated the pandemic bonus story, and it turns out she only gave the pandemic bonus to her friends from different departments and a very generous one to herself. Plus, since I've quit, no one was actually able to do my job, and the fact that Karen was responsible for me leaving made her responsible for the consequences. So, after reviewing everything, the CEO decided to terminate Karen's contract. Rumor has it that the whole staff of Happy Place celebrated this joyous occasion. The cherry on top. Last week, my boss at Cool Company walked into my office and said, "Oh Pete, you know Jen from HR is retiring soon, right? We did interviews to replace her, and one of the candidates is Karen. She seems competent, but asks for quite a lot of money. You and her work together, right? What's she like? Do you think she deserves to be paid more than we initially offered?" I said, "Boss, you have a few minutes? Great. Let me tell you a story." After hearing my very honest opinion of Karen, Boss Man laughed and said, "Okay, good to know. I think we will tell her that she is not the right fit for us. Thanks, Austin." As soon as Boss Man left my office, I sent an email to my friend Lori from HR, who was in charge of replying to candidates. I also told her the story and asked her to keep me informed if there's any development with the whole Karen applies to Cool Company thing. A few hours later, I got an email from Lori. Turns out, she copied me to her official reply to Karen. It read, "Dear Karen, thank you for your interest in working for Cool Company. After careful consideration, we regret to inform you that in our opinion, your responsibilities and your abilities are not worth that much." I brought Lori a big chocolate cookie the next day. You want things done by the book? All right, let's do that. Posted by Anomalous Treasure. I work as a freelance artist doing advertisement, ticket, and program booklet designs for various police and firefighter events that give to children's charities. It's not consistent work, but it pays pretty well for what it is. The people I work with directly are a promotions company that was created to sell the advertisement space and tickets. I've been working for them for a long time. Throughout the pandemic, these people were essentially my only source of income, so I had to put up with their BS. Mostly having to put up with having to hear, the check is in the mail, for 2 or 3 months before it actually arrives. I convinced the owner of the company to download PayPal so I could be paid in a reasonable time. He was confused on how to use it. So I told him about Cash App. I was paid through Cash App only once before he said, "I just want to keep doing this by the book. These websites you're sending me look too scammy." And because I don't work for him, I work for the unions, and they're the ones cutting the checks. I asked him if he really wants to do that. Of course, he said yes. Cue malicious compliance. He's becoming quite upset with me since he realized doing it by the book actually gives me all the leverage. From that point forward, I had begun putting my logo watermark on every single thing I sent him. The first time he experienced this was with show tickets. He asked me to remove the watermark and send it to the printers. He was satisfied with the work. I told him the watermark will come off when there is money in my account. He told me that he can't start making sales until he has the tickets to sell, thus he doesn't have the money to pay me. Oh man, that sucks. Better figure out how to pay me electronically then. Here's my Bitcoin and Ethereum wallets, PayPal, and Cash App info, as well as info for direct deposit. He insisted that he couldn't pay me before he has the tickets, so he agreed to a 50% price increase for me to release the files to him without pay, and with my company's logo on them. I actually got paid for that today. The second time was with a show poster. The same instance occurred, only this time I was told I'd have to talk to the Fraternal Order of Police, FOP, about being paid since I work for them. They were very confused when I called them, and an hour later, I got an angry phone call and was paid by direct deposit from the promoter's business account, not the Fraternal Order of Police account. This morning was pretty interesting. He called me up while meeting with the police association to talk about cutting me a check for the last show that happened yesterday. On this call, I was asked about bank transfers, asked how to make a Bitcoin wallet, all that good stuff. But the promoter asked why my invoice stated that I'm no longer accepting checks as a form of payment. Are you sure you want me to answer that in this meeting? I asked him. He said yes, so I told him while he was on speakerphone with his boss. But because you don't pay me for months when we do checks, I only accept online or bank transfers. There was a little back and forth between him and the guy from the police association. It didn't sound like Mr. Promoter was having a good time. I was told I would get a call back about payment. Well, I received that call from the police association, not the promotion agency. I've been paid via PayPal and apologized to profusely. When I got a call from the promoter afterward, he had a very upset tone. He asked why I'm doing all this. Well, sir, you told me you wanted it done by the book, right? This is by the book. We didn't do it by the book before because I've worked with you for years and your son is my best friend. So, this is how it will be from now on. We'll see how it turns out. I'm confident I won't be losing any work since the police associations, firefighters, and other organizations have repeatedly told me how great my work looks and how I often work at half the price of other freelancers. Can't you just unload around me? Posted by Barbecue Lunch. So this happened earlier today and was too perfect to not share with you guys. I work in construction as the foreman for a new house build. The location is kind of strange. The house is 250 feet up a hill via a footpath only. All of our materials have to come up this footpath by hand. It's a pain in the butt to manually carry, quite literally, an entire house up this hill. One of our saving graces is having the 2 parking spots on the street at the bottom of this hill marked with an official no parking signs. Unfortunately, there is an elementary school about half a block away, and the parents of the children seem to regularly, at least twice a day, think it's okay to park in our spots. Now, I consider myself a reasonable person, so if someone is parked in the spots and we don't have a delivery or a need to park the truck, I'll let it go. If we need the spots and there's someone parked there, however, I will ask them to move nicely, and most of the time, they do so immediately. Until today. I get a phone call from the lumber delivery truck that is en route to our location. He says he'll be there in about 2 or 3 minutes. I let him know that I will meet him at the street and make sure he has space to park. He's carrying all of the material to frame the roof of our house, which is a lot of really big lumber, and will easily take an hour to bring up the hill. So naturally, I didn't want him parked in the middle of the street with his hazards on for an hour, when we have a perfectly good parking spot for him. As I began my trip down the hill, I noticed there is a school parent sitting in her car idling. Assuming she's just waiting to pick up her child, I walk to her car and politely let her know that she's parked in a no parking zone, and we really need her to clear it to park a delivery truck. She scoffs at me and rudely states back, "It'll be just a few minutes, and your truck isn't here. Take a chill pill, dude." Before I can respond, a giant lumber truck comes around the corner and I wave to him, and then gestured towards him to the woman in the car, who has now put her window back up to ignore me. I put on my best customer service smile and wave at her through the window. She put it down halfway and angrily shouts, "What?" By now the truck has pulled up alongside her car, and I politely ask her again with a stronger tone of voice to move her vehicle, reminding her that she is illegally parked in a tow-away zone. Then she gives me this wonderful idea. She says, "Can't you guys just unload around me? Jeez, it's not that hard." I give her another smile and walk away, a brilliant plan forming in my head. I instruct the delivery driver to park as closely to her as possible and block her in with the porta potty that is at one end of our reserve spots and the parked car that is parked just adjacent to our spots on the other end. He smiles because he immediately gets what I'm trying to do and proceeds to expertly block this lady and her car into a little 2 parking spot jail. We unstrap the lumber and my guys begin humping material up the hill. Meanwhile, I call the police parking enforcement to let them know the situation. At this point in time, I wasn't trying to get her in trouble. I just wanted a record of why we were blocking part of the street so we don't get in trouble with the city. The very friendly traffic officer lets me know that she can be there in about 30 minutes and deal with the situation for me. Wonderful. As we continue to unload lumber, the child of the parent shows up, and wouldn't you know it, Mom is just now realizing that the lumber truck is parked so close that she can't get out of her driver door to meet her kid. She awkwardly clambers across the inside of her car and stumbles out the passenger door, shooting glaring looks at me and the truck driver in the process. She loads her kid into the back and then begins to realize that she has no way of leaving. She comes storming up to myself and the driver and states, "I'm in a big hurry. You need to move your dang truck right now so I can go." Before I can respond, the driver gets a grin on his face and says, "Ma'am, in order to unload the lumber on the truck, we had to unstrap it, and per our company policy, I'm not allowed to move the truck with any unsecured load on it. Sorry." This sends her into near aneurysm levels of blood pressure. Meanwhile, I can barely contain my laughter. "Screw your policy, I have somewhere to be," she barks back at him. At this point, with impeccably convenient timing, the parking enforcement officer shows up and parks behind the truck. She doesn't see the officer arrive, and while the officer is still getting out of her vehicle, I just casually say, "Can't you just pull out around it? It's not that hard." With the biggest crap-eating grin I've ever had as I watch as she realizes that I had just used her line on her. "Screw you," she yells, and storms back to her car and angrily clambers back in through the passenger door and into the driver's seat. At this point, the officer is walking up to myself and the driver, and before she can even introduce herself, the mom in the car slams it into reverse, stomps on the gas, crashing into our porta potty and knocking it over, and then throws the car into drive and tries to mount the curb and drive on the sidewalk. The officer, driver, and I are staring in disbelief as she gets halfway over the curb and gets stuck. I can hear her screaming obscenities over the idling truck from inside the car. The officer promptly walks up to the door of her car and orders her out. My favorite part of the entire thing is watching her face go to shock as she realized she just did all of that in front of a police officer. She gets slapped in cuffs as the parking officer calls for a second unit, and she is promptly sat on the very curb that she tried to drive over. She sits on the curb yelling to the now 2 officers about how we told her she could stay there and that we never asked for her to move. The traffic officer responds that she was the one who was originally called when she first refused to move and that she already knows what's going on. While myself and the driver are giving a report to the second officer, my guys finish moving the remainder of the lumber and the driver finishes his statement and takes off to go back to the yard. By the end of the ordeal, she was arrested, charged with child endangerment, which her kid was in the back of the car the whole time, reckless driving, destruction of property, the porta potty, and driving on a suspended license. On top of all that, she also got her car towed. The kid went home with his grandma and she went to spend some quality time in a cell. I never expected her to actually heed my advice to just pull out around it. But I think next time she'll probably think twice about parking in a tow-away zone if she ever gets a license again. Sue Karen, she towed my deployed brother's car off our property with an update. Click the video on your screen so you find out what happens to Karen, and I'll see you there.